On a rainy night in 1999, a missile designed in the 1950s shot down the most advanced stealth jet on Earth, a plane the world had been told was invisible. The jet was an American F-117 Nighthawk, untouchable through Panama, through Desert Storm, through a decade of missions no radar could follow. The missile that killed it was older than the pilot flying the plane, and the man who fired it wasn't some legendary general with cutting-edge technology. He was a colonel who, in peacetime, worked as a baker. For 25 years, people have asked the same question. How? How does a bakery-running colonel with a museum-piece missile system kill a ghost that the world's most powerful air force swore could not be seen? The answer is a masterclass in patience, discipline, and one fatal American habit. And the ending of this story, what happened between the shooter and the pilot years later, is something no Hollywood writer would dare invent. We'll get there. The night of March 27th, 1999, the myth of the invisible plane died. And it was killed by a man, not a machine. This is how it happened. By the spring of 1999, NATO was bombing Yugoslavia, and the F-117 was doing what it always did, slipping through Serbian air defenses night after night to strike targets around Belgrade, one of the most heavily defended cities in Europe. The Serbs fired missiles into the dark. Nothing connected. The ghost seemed as untouchable as ever. But something dangerous was happening on the American side. Something no enemy could have engineered. Success was breeding routine. Night after night, the black jets flew similar corridors at similar times, along paths the defenders slowly began to recognize. The most sophisticated aircraft in the world was being flown with the predictability of a city bus. Stealth, you see, was never a magic cloak. It shrinks the range at which radar can find you. It doesn't erase you. Fly unpredictably, and that shrunken window is impossible to exploit. Fly the same route enough times, and you're handing the enemy the one thing stealth cannot survive: an ambush. The F-117 wasn't betrayed by its technology, it was betrayed by the deadliest force in warfare: habit. And on the ground below, one man had spent years preparing for exactly this gift. His name was Zoltán Dani, commander of a battalion of the 250th Air Defense Missile Brigade, and in civilian life, a baker. His weapon was the S-125 Niva, a Soviet missile system introduced around 1961. On paper, he had no business threatening a stealth jet. But Dani understood something most missile commanders never did. In a war against NATO, the radar that stays on dies. NATO's specialist jets hunted air defense radars the moment they lit up. So Dani drilled his crews into a brutal discipline: move constantly, hide, and when you finally switch the radar on, keep it on for a handful of seconds. No more. His unit survived the entire war doing this while other batteries were destroyed around him. And he went further. He reportedly modified his aging radars to work on longer wavelengths, frequencies that, by a quirk of physics, could catch a faint whisper of a stealth jet's shape at closer range. He studied NATO's flight patterns. He positioned his launchers under the corridors the black jets kept reusing. Dani couldn't make his old missiles smarter, so he made himself smarter and waited under the one patch of sky he knew the ghost would cross. On the fourth night of the war, it crossed. March 27th, 1999, around 8:15 in the evening. An F-117 with the call sign Vega 31. Its crew name, fittingly, something wicked, had just struck its target near Belgrade and turned for home. In the cockpit sat Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko, a Desert Storm veteran, and by many accounts, fate had already tilted the table. The radar-jamming escort jets that normally shielded the Nighthawks weren't covering that corridor that night. The ghost was flying naked. Below, Dani's crew powered up. They caught a flicker on their screens at long range. And when his men reported they were tracking the incoming jet, Dani reportedly smiled and said to himself, "Good, so it works." Then they played their deadly game. Radar on, snatch a fix, radar off before NATO could strike back. By the accounts of the crew, their equipment was switched on for no more than 17 seconds. On the third attempt, at a range of just 8 miles, the lock held. Dani would later claim the moment of opportunity came when the jet's bomb bay doors opened, briefly ballooning its radar reflection. 2 missiles tore upward through the clouds. Zelko saw them. 2 brilliant dots accelerating toward him at 3.5 times the speed of sound. The first passed so close it shook his aircraft. The second detonated, shredding the night with thousands of steel fragments. The invisible jet had been found, fixed, and killed in 17 seconds of radar time by a missile system nearly 40 years old. The Nighthawk flipped inverted and fell. And Zelko's night was just beginning. The blast threw the jet into a violent, inverted plunge. The G-force is so crushing that Zelko could barely reach the ejection handle. He got out barely, and as he drifted down under his parachute into enemy territory, a strange thought crossed his mind. He later admitted he found himself imagining the Serbian missile officer who had just shot him down, sitting across from him, and telling the man with genuine professional respect, "Real nice shot." He was, without knowing it, the first and only pilot ever shot down in an F-117. He landed in enemy farmland, less than a minute's drive from the burning wreck of his own aircraft. What followed was a textbook lesson in survival. Zelko buried himself in a muddy irrigation ditch and went silent. Serbian search parties swept the fields around him. By some accounts, they passed within 100 meters of where he lay. He didn't move. For hours, one of America's most classified pilots hid in the dirt of a country that was hunting him on live television, because by now, Serbian TV was showing the world the burning wreckage of the invisible plane. Then, deep in the night, salvation. American Special Operations helicopters, packed with pararescue men, threaded their way into hostile territory. Somewhere between 5 and 8 hours after ejecting, Zelko was snatched off the ground and carried out. America lost the jet that night, but an extraordinary rescue made sure it didn't lose the man. The Serbs, though, still held the prize, and what they did with it echoes to this day. Serbia was celebrating with dark humor. A now famous billboard went up. "Sorry, we didn't know it was invisible." Pieces of the Nighthawk, its wing, its canopy, went on display in a Belgrade museum, where they still sit today. But the truly valuable pieces didn't stay in a museum. It is widely reported that fragments of the F-117's radar-absorbing skin and components found their way to Russia and China, the two nations most desperate to learn stealth's secrets. If true, the wreckage scattered across that Serbian field became a study kit for the very stealth programs, like China's J-20 that America fears today. One shootdown, feeding 2 rival superpowers' homework, and Dani's brigade wasn't finished. Weeks later, the same unit shot down an American F-16, flown by a pilot who would one day rise to become the chief of staff of the entire U.S. Air Force. One battalion, with antique missiles, had bagged a stealth jet and a future 4-star general's aircraft in a single war. The Baker's unit didn't just wound a jet, it wounded a legend, and shipped the pieces to America's rivals. Yet the strangest chapter of the story was still 12 years away. Here's the ending nobody saw coming. After the war, Zoltán Dani went home and went back to baking bread in his small hometown. Dale Zelko stayed in the Air Force, then retired. 2 men permanently linked by 17 seconds over Serbia. And in 2011, they met. Not in a courtroom, not at a memorial, but face to face, by choice. The pilot and the man who shot him down shook hands, talked, and discovered they genuinely liked each other. They visited each other's homes, they met each other's families. A documentary, fittingly titled The Second Meeting, captured the friendship that grew between them. The missile connected 2 men for 17 seconds, and then, 12 years later, connected them for life. The man who fell from the sky and the man who brought him down now call each other friends. So, What did that night really prove? Be careful with the easy answer. It did not prove stealth is useless. The F-117s kept flying missions for the rest of the war, and only one was ever lost in combat. What it proved is sharper. Stealth is not a cloak, it's an advantage, and any advantage can be squandered. NATO's predictability, one commander's iron discipline, a 17-second gamble, and a moment's open bomb bay doors. That's what it took. Every stealth pilot flying today in far more advanced jets trains under the shadow of that lesson. And maybe the deeper lesson is about people. The most advanced machine of its age was beaten by patience, study, and nerve. Qualities that cost nothing and can't be jammed. Technology wins wars only until a determined human finds its habit. The jets that hunt those missile launchers, the pilots whose actual job is to bait enemy radars into locking onto them, have one of the most insane missions in aviation history. That story is next. You won't want to miss it. Stick around.